Rita and James, the Liberal Party will formally oppose enshrining an Indigenous voice to Parliament in the Constitution, something the three of us have debated and discussed many times on this show. So let's rip into it. First of all, James, your opinion.
Well, I'm glad that they got there. It did take them a long time. It took them a little longer than possibly it should have. The thing that I'm kind of...
A little longer? 10 months? 10 months?
Well, we've had a long discussion about, Rita, about the tactics around this. The thing that I'm actually much more disappointed about, though, is that they didn't wind up going with a first principles rejection of the voice, which is about, that this is giving people an extra vote to be represented to the government, depending on what their background and what their race is. I know there's a current push on now to say it's not about race, it's about indigeneity, which doesn't quite...
That makes no sense.
That's a new line.
But the thing
that I think really is interesting is I am sensing a very passionate no campaign, no vote out there in the community. And I think that this whole idea that you hear from all the commentariat where they say, oh, Peter Dutton will be blamed. No, Peter Dutton will be thanked by millions of people if this goes down, which millions of people want it to do, not because they don't like Indigenous people or because they're mean and nasty, as Dan Andrews said, or because there could be Nazis, as other people have suggested, but rather because, they don't think the Constitution should be altered in this fashion. Rita.
Oh, my goodness. Some of the gaslighting we are seeing from the left is shameful. Some of the ugly tactics. We just played you a little bit of it there from Dan Andrews and Noel Pearson. And what Noel Pearson said, and it was only extraordinarily offensive to the Jewish community.
And to Julie and Lisa.
To Julie and Lisa, but just to, thinking people everywhere. He then had the hide in that same interview to say, when they go low, we go high, whilst he employs tactics like that. When they go as low as you can possibly go, and yet they pretend they've got the moral high ground. Well, Australians aren't stupid. They're not going to fall for that. They're not going to be guilted into supporting something that they fundamentally disagree with. I disagree with you too about praising the Liberal Party here. I think their opposition is very confused. They're talking about a regional voice. No, we don't want this because we don't want Australians to be separated on the basis of their race. We don't want to enshrine racial politics into the Constitution, whether it's a Canberra voice or a regional voice. We already have hundreds of Indigenous advisory bodies. We are already listening to the Indigenous community. So this entire sort of alternative they're putting up is...
Let me just pull you up there, because unless I've misunderstood this, they're not talking about these regional voices being enshrined in the Constitution.
No, but they're still talking about a regional as an alternative.
It's that linkage of, have whatever other bureaucracies you want. They're saying, let's have some more bureaucracies out in remote...
Do we want more bureaucracy in this space?
No, that's another issue.
But that's not a constitutional alteration.
What they've done is they've broken the nexus, the linkage between this, whatever it is, symbolic, bureaucratic thing, whatever it is, and being in the Constitution. So a bureaucracy, spending taxpayers' money, and the Constitution. They've broken that. They've slammed that into... That's the critical thing that they have done.
True, but just talking about this soft no, the fact that it's not an emphatic no, I think...
It is an emphatic no, and if you heard Peter Dutton, he was saying...
Susan Ley.
Who cares about Susan Ley? She's the deputy, she's not the leader, so you listen to the leader, not the deputy. Who cares about the deputy?
But can I say one other thing about Noel Pearson?
Yes.
He talked about that really offensive diatribe about, do they want us to wear a star to identify us? Well, if you actually do have a voice and only people with some Indigenous heritage can participate, that's when you have the star.
Exactly.
That's when you're asking people to prove their Indigenous heritage so they can participate in something that all other Australians are excluded from. Right now,
100%.
We're all one. We're all equal. We're all entitled to one vote. That is the democratic process, not enshrining racial privilege into the Constitution,
but not only...
where if you can prove who your ancestors were, you get an additional vote, you get an additional say. Since when has that been a sign of equality? I mean, am I living in some sort of parallel universe to these bloody people? Because I am getting so sick of having lies presented as the truth, and if you question those lies, they call you racist.
You're a racist, exactly. James?
Oh, well, I was just going to say that what this is really doing is, putting in the Constitution the left's program, which has been around for decades now, which has been to undermine the legitimacy of Australia.
Exactly.
And I tell you what, as a migrant here, as someone who became a citizen 15 or so years ago, the idea that now suddenly my citizenship is conditional on how long my tenure has been in this country, I find that, frankly, really offensive. And I think that migrant communities out there who are going to come out here and say, whoa, hang on a second, I thought this was one rule for all. And I'll tell you what, there are going to be people from some countries that have gone much further down this path, like Malaysia, where there's going to be a big kick up about it.
You know what? If the Liberals had any political acumen, they would have come out with an emphatic no well before the Aston by-election.
Sure.
Because they could have actually gone to the by-election with at least one policy where they're different to the coalition, and they could have fought on it. And there's a big migrant community in Aston. And yeah, with the migrant community, they don't suffer from this destructive white guilt that a lot of Australians seem to be afflicted with. I can tell you, I'm a migrant to this country. I'm a refugee to this country. I was given chance at a new life here. So I'm eternally grateful to this country, and I do not want to see it turned into some sort of a backwater where your heritage determines your rights. That is the sort of tyranny that most people flee from. And this country is just... I really do worry about some of the rhetoric that we are seeing. It's still early. We're still months away from this vote, and some of the arguments being put forward are really quite ugly and sinister.
And what's going to happen, because it's been off the radar of most people, Albanese was hoping to just kind of get this through on the vibe, on the goodwill. And Australians are full of goodwill towards Indigenous and all Australians, all other Australians. That's the Australian character. So they're hoping to trade off that and insert something into the Constitution which will be destructive, incredibly destructive. As Jacinta Price has said, does it mean, if we have something in the Constitution, a voice in the Constitution to help disadvantaged Australians, something in the Constitution for all time, does that mean white Australia intends for Indigenous Australians to be disadvantaged for all time? And that's a great insight. She's full of great insights, and she's come out strongly against Noel Pearson's incredibly offensive rhetoric. But I had to laugh, Rita and James, at this particular response from Marsha Langton. It's astonishing how those who've been pushing the voice have suddenly turned very strident indeed. She's come out.
Marsha Langton
said, if you vote no, you won't get a welcome to country again. Well, Marsha, I hope you live up to that promise. Thank you, Rita.
Well, yes, your terms are acceptable, Marsha. Thank you very much. As the kids say, don't threaten me with a good time. Noel Pearson also came out with a comment about, if this is voted down, then you won't be... he's going to fall silent.
Hang on, which side is he campaigning for now?
The no vote. Another endorsement for the no vote.
But let's talk about the welcome to country thing, because this is really important, because I think I'm sensing a lot of Australians, you go on an aeroplane now, you go to this, a lot of Australians, you get the silent groan, you get the roll of the eyes. I think corporate Australia has forced what was originally a well-intentioned, well-meaning idea, this kind of acknowledgement, welcome, whatever you want to call it, to country. But personally, I am fed up of being welcomed to my own country. Marsha Langton, I hate to tell it, this is not your country. It's not my country, it's our country. We share it. And it's nice of you to say welcome to country occasionally at a symbolic event, but not every single day and every single place I go. I'm kind of tired of it, Rita.
The sentiment against this is enormous, and people are too scared to voice what many believe, because, God forbid, you should actually say that I feel as entitled to call this land my country as anybody else. And again, I talked about the migrant community, me as a migrant, James as a migrant. This notion of always was, always will be, that's essentially a PC way of saying go back to where you came from.
Yeah, go back to where you came from, exactly.
Ugly sentiment, and I can tell you a lot of migrants receive it that way. So if the Liberals can find their backbone and come out emphatically against this, not apologetically, not, well, you know, we're sorry to have to oppose it, but for the good of the country we have to. No, to come out unapologetically and say, this is divisive, this is destructive, we will not have any form of this in this country, I think they will get enormous support. But you cannot have the likes of Susan Ley doing that job that she did when the opposition was announced. That was
pathetic. I agree.
Okay, thank you.
And that was utterly pathetic. And those bedwetting libs are in the absolute minority. I have to say, I'm going to say it, I'm going to congratulate Julian Leeser because he's been dedicated and passionate about this topic and put in more work probably than anyone else in Australia. And he's recognised, ultimately, the reality of what is being offered by Albanese is not acceptable. So hats off to Julian Leeser for accepting that.
Oh, okay. No, because he wants this in the Constitution.
That's fine, but no
not in
is
the current form.
When you get into that referendum booth, it's either yes or it's no. All the other, James, all the other little bits and pieces go by the by. It's a yes or a no, and I believe the majority of Australian people in the majority of Australian states will say no, and it will be emphatic.
Well, what we're going to see very shortly, and there's already been signs of it, we are going to see a PR campaign like you have never seen before. The same-sex marriage plebiscite will have nothing on this. We already know the AFL, NRL, all the sporting codes are going to back the Yes campaign. Today on the front page of the papers is that there's going to be a push to get every Indigenous athlete to back this, from Kathy Freeman to Adam Goods to Ash Barty. We don't know yet.
Well, this is going to backfire.
All I can do is you're silly if you do.
Rita, this is going to backfire. This is going to be just like the Republic, you know, where all the lovies, all the bien-pensants thought that this thing was going to go through, and it didn't, because people saw through this as, you know, a constitutional change that they didn't want. It is changing the Constitution. That point needs to be hammered over and over again. And when you talk about the arguments, you know, and the first principles, that is what Peter Dutton and the opposition and everybody who is opposed to this needs to keep hitting: constitutional change. And that's what this is about.
And that's a no, and that will be a no from the people of Australia.